Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Propaganda Review with me, your host, Imperial Dane, looking at Total War, Saga, Thrones of Britannia, having sort of played through a bit there, sort of think I've, collected sufficient, information, playing, just, some thoughts on, Thrones of Britannia, a Total War Saga. Is it worth it or not? I mean, the thing to keep in mind, it's not meant to be like a full Total War game, that's what claim. It's also not priced as one, it's priced close to a Total War Attila. So in that regard, I'll probably run in this review sort of more in the style of, well, compare this with Total War Attila, which they by the way still at roughly a full price for that size package. Is it that good compared with Total War Attila? I mean, this is basically the benchmark. Total War Attila. Does Thrones of Britannia compare with Total War Attila? Short answer, no. Long answer, well, let's have a look at it. I mean, overall, again, running the whole comparative, theoretically start off with a lot of factions. You got, overall 5 factions within 10 minus sort of sub-factions. You got the English Kingdoms, you got the Welsh, you got the Gaelic, you got the Great Viking Armies, you got the Viking Sea Kings. Again, overall, theoretically, by the looks of it, a lot of it. The thing is, though, once you sort of really get down into, brass tacks, they're actually very similar. Playing the English Kingdoms isn't too difficult. Playing the Great Viking Army, the Viking Sea Kings, the Welsh, even the Gaelic, they're not vastly different. Their armies very much look the same, play the same. Some armies might have slightly more cavalry, some might have slightly more spearmen, but overall how the armies function are very much incredibly similar. In particular, also on the larger map, they largely use all of the same buildings with some smaller, tiny, minute differences here and there between the factions. And a lot of that just sort of, keeps appearing for it. There's some difference in the sort of sort of stats bonuses the faction get, but sort of in how they play, again, there's no real difference. You're playing English Kingdoms, the Welsh, the Gaelic, the Great Viking Army, and the Viking Sea Kings, and whatever attempts to try to create challenges overall don't really do that. The Great Viking Army, for example, is supposed to, deal with stuff like, the Hare King, but the problem is, because it's surrounded by the English, you're just going to be getting constant penalties, and that's probably one of the bigger things with this. The game has so much snowballing and rubber banding mechanics, either you're winning hard and then things go wrong, boom, you suddenly pull back. And that just leads to sort of slightly, more tiresome gameplay, tedious rather than anything else. You're just, trying to move through sticky syrup or anything, and it's just, it doesn't feel necessarily very organic, and it just can get frustrating. And suddenly, okay, I lost a battle, but now it suddenly takes, all the mechanics with, you train troops, you start out and let's just get this going, instead of just hiring full unit, it just completely puts you in the back foot because, again, congrats. Now you just got to build up the entire unit, around, let's say, 60%. That then, and that, is particularly amazingly good. Again, quite the opposite. It rather, to an extent, devaluates, I think, the entire package they've got going on there. When, again, there's just these many similarities between the faction. When, again, everybody just more or less has these chilled spearmen and sword hitmen also appear a lot, and the long axemen for some really appear a lot. There's just nothing there done to differentiate them, and similar with the archers. There's just these massive similarities between most of the factions on so many levels, and it just becomes very repetitive. And there's not really a lot done to make the factions play differently compared to, say, Attila Total War, where in the Western and Eastern Roman Empire, they had reasonably different rosters. Initially, they start out similar, but as the game progresses, they diverge quite aggressively, with the Eastern Roman Empire having a lot more cavalry and other stuff, whereas the Western Roman, focus more on infantry, for example. So there's some bigger differences there, but here it just never manifests. The tech tree is pretty short. Most of the time you'll quickly have most of your stuff then researched, and that's it. The game to an extent feels very, I think, thin on content, and actually in that regard I'd probably not say it's worth the price they're currently asking for. To be honest, research-wise as well, there's whereas in the previous old games there used to be a lot to research about the topic. Again, here it's just very much briefer, shallow, and while they try to make it more interesting, the problem is, again, it just it all just becomes very much the same. Plus, even any of the factions in the southeast over here, research for bonuses just becomes even more tedious because you first have to conquer certain cities and then get them upgraded, and then you can research, and it's a whole slog, and it just doesn't particularly feel rewarding a lot of the time. Diplomacy is not really that different. Basically, vassals don't turn you at the drop of a hat. that's about it. I mean, the factions that probably end up looking the most unique are probably the ones that, they're controlled by the area and attack you, like, the Vikings, or the Normans actually appear as well. Like, they get some cool, interesting units. You don't. And I suspect they're probably planning some DLC, because you didn't notice in the main menu at the start there's a big button that says DLC. So the reality is they're probably going to try and sneak in, you can play these factions, the invader armies, horde armies. Hey, look at this, you can do this stuff, for a price. And then you're like, well, you probably should have done that in the first place as them playable. Of course, the problem is right now you're not going to get a lot of people to stick around, because the main package is just beige. It's just very much the same thing over and over again with very little variety. At least there's some more interesting facts. I mean, the Viking armies they invade, probably look more like Viking armies than these Viking armies. You can play, they get some cool stuff like the Yoms Vikings and, Viking troops. You get Englishmen. And the constants that represents the mixing and all that. But even then, you should have the option of getting more Viking troops than you currently do. So the game, in many ways, just it just feels like not very ambitious, despite probably claiming, oh, we made this game really ambitiously. But like, compare this with Attila, and there's just a lot less content. So again, if you're asking me, Dane, should I buy Total War Saga Thrones of Britannia or Attila, even though Attila is several years old? I would say buy Attila, unless you're really, really, really set on having to play here and you don't mind everything feels the same, you just want to play on the British Isles, then buy Attila, because it has more content, plus stuff that has been added for free. It's probably also going to be sale for more pricey than during the Steam Summer Sale that's going to go on any sale at some point. So I mean, it's just a better package. There's more variety, you get more factions to play with, more different terrain. And you just get so much more compared with here, where you just basically get a very, very thin, I'd say, sparse package. It's like they had a really large piece of toast and tried to scrape too much butter across it, and it's clearly they're not putting enough butter down, and they refuse to put any other additional butter on, even some topping, some good cheese or a nice slice of salami. They're just refusing it. And that makes, I would say, Total War Saga Thrones of Britannia, while theoretically ambitious in some ways, certainly they had a lot of potential. Ultimately, it just results in a lot of the rubber banding, snowball mechanics, combined with ultimately, I think, a very unsatisfying gameplay experience, as most of the factions play incredibly same, and several of them play even more similarly than, a bunch of the others, which just makes this entire experience just incredibly, long-term, very bland. Again, compared with Attila, where if you're playing the Roman Empire, you're going to get a different experience than if you're playing the Saracens, or if you're playing, well, not Saracens, but you can't quite remember the name now. It's not the Saracens, the Sassanids, or if you're playing, the Teutonics, or anything else. There's a great variety there in how the factions play, again, how their armies diverge and sort of what tactics they use. And then you get this, where again, there's not really a massive difference between how they play or the units play. There's very little there. And there's also stuff about the estates, but really it just becomes more tedium. It's just, more pointless micromanagement that doesn't really result in anything. It doesn't really result in a better political system, because ultimately you're just doing it to appease someone who's making a fuss. You're not doing this because, it really does anything neat. It's just, I've got to get these guys to shut up, so I'm just going to hand them some estates. That's it. So, while there's a lot of potential, it just feels like they really haven't done anything with such potential. They just really scrape the bottom of the barrel in terms of ambition, effort, and anything else, and just, left it at that. It's not a bad, I would still say it's better than Total War Warhammer, but, again, if you were to ask me to recommend your recent Total War game, I'd say go for Attila, because Attila blows Total War Saga Thrones of Britannia out of the water. So, I mean, that's pretty much my review. Buy Total War Attila instead of this. So, I mean, hopefully this video will help again, get you clued into what you want this game or not. And again, my advice would be get Attila. And, that's it. I mean, I wanted to like this game, but, it sounded really cool. But in the end, it's just, it's sort of, I mean, I'm not upset. I'm just disappointed. It's just, fneh. And that's about it, really. It's just, fneh. Meh. Shrug on the shoulders, scratching the head, scratching the beard a bit. I mean, again, it had potential, but ultimately when they make the AI factions look more interesting than what you're getting, you're usually doing something wrong. So yeah, again, interesting, but just actually just failed to utilize potential and just not very ambitious, despite probably what they were claimed by the PR. And also, clearly, they're probably going to sell more of this interesting stuff with the DLC, but the problem is if the main package isn't interesting, no one's going to stick around for the DLC, and they certainly shouldn't have to pay for the DLC to make the get an interesting game experience. I mean, no matter how you look at that, that's a really, really not good way of doing business. So, yeah, like theoretically useful, but honestly, right now, go buy it here. So this is rather it here for me, Imperial Dane, Master Propaganda, Master Reviews. If you like this, subscribe, like, share, comment on it. If you wish to support me, and for that matter, would like to see me do more game reviews, let me know in the comments. But also, like, subscribe, share, and of course donate or pledge on Patreon. As gives you more funds, buy more games and do reviews of them. So this is Imperial Dane signing off, and again, I hope you like this. Cheers.